Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode. I'm so excited you are here. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that if you're listening around the time that this comes out, which is in August 2024, if you're listening later, I apologize. I'm sure I'll have classes. But if you're listening at the time, I'm going to have a free class on September 10th, 2024. And it's going to be all about how to quit the rat race. Whether you're going to stay in your job or you're going to leave your job, if you want to figure out how to prevent or stop burnout and actually be able to work in corporate America without losing your mind, if you want to kind of learn how to take control of your career and not be in this hamster wheel that so many of us get caught in, you can join my class on September 10th. You can go to quitterclub.com/masterclass to sign up. I hope to see you there. If you like the podcast and you like the stuff that we talk about like today and in every other episode, you will get more of that, but more in depth, more teachings, more workshop-y kind of work that you will kind of walk away from knowing how to apply it to your own career. So join me on September 10th for how to quit the rat race at quitterclub.com/masterclass. All right. I wanted to make this episode because I've realized that so much of why we operate, the way we operate, and so much of the harm that we create ourselves within our jobs comes from how we were programmed in school. Obviously, that's not a surprise. Like, you learn to be a certain way from when you're a child through not just high school, but often college and grad school. You operate one way for so long that sort of becomes your MO. That's how you think everything in the world needs to be. That's how you have sort of proved yourself. That's how you got, quote unquote, successful. And so you continue to operate in that way. And I've realized that because so many of us are operating under the paradigm of what worked in school, we are burning ourselves out at work because that paradigm doesn't work in corporate America. It doesn't work in the corporate world. And you have to really become aware of these beliefs and these paradigms and these foundations that you've been instilled with in order to start breaking free of it. I think for a lot of us, we just assume that what we think is right or it just is the way it is, and it's not. You can change it and you can start acting in a different way with respect to your career. But you can't do that until you sort of see what paradigm you were operating under before, right? So I want to talk about everything that you have to unlearn that you learned in school in order to really be successful in work. And I don't mean successful like get to the highest position. I mean in order to be able to have a career that you don't burn out from, in order to not be exhausted all the time, in order to actually like your career and not dread going into work every day. So here's all the things that I think, from what I've seen from working with my clients, that you need to unlearn, okay? One is when you're in school, a big tenet or a big thing that you've been taught is to go above and beyond, give 110%, right? We've all heard those sayings, and it starts very early on. And we're going to put aside from the fact that like you quite literally can't give 110% because that's not how math works. You can only give 100%. But the sentiment behind it is like always do extra, right? And in school, you often did get rewarded for that, right? If you did extra credit, you got more, higher scores on your in class, on your assignments. It helped you bump up your grade. You ended up reaping those rewards. Like you maybe got a higher GPA, which would help you get into a better school. And so you saw this sort of return on investment, right? If I do more work, if I do extra credit, if I, raise my hand for that project, if I show the teacher that I'm really involved, if I do all of this extra stuff, then I will be rewarded for it in some way. Unfortunately, that's not the case in corporate America. I feel like with corporate America or with work, you sort of have to think of it. There's a saying that's what's the prize for winning a pie eating contest? More pie. That's what it is with work. Nobody is giving you extra credit. Nobody is really like marking your. Obviously you're getting reviews and stuff, but I think that for a lot of us, we think if I'm just the biggest team player, and if I'm the biggest helper, and if I'm the teacher's pet, and if I'm doing all of these things, then I'm going to get rewarded. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of us, what we've seen is that that's just not the truth. You can break your own back. You can do more than everybody else. You can take on your coworkers' assignments. You can, when they say jump, say how high. And oftentimes that's still not what is going to get you promoted. That's not what's going to get you a salary increase. That's not what's going to even get you job security, to be honest. Like, a lot of you might kill yourself for years and years and years, and you still get laid off when there's a round of layoffs, because of course, corporate America wants you to give it your all, and they still do try to instill these kind of sayings of, work hard, play hard, and we're a family and whatever, and getting you to kind of be a team player and wanting you to accept this idea that you have to do as much as possible to help everybody else around. But for you, when you have to think about your career and how you want to approach it, for a lot of us, doing all of this extra work does not result in additional benefits or additional pay or anything. It just results in additional work. It's just like the prize for doing really good work and more work is just more work. And that's not to say that you have to mail it in. I know there was like the trend on social media was like quiet quitting, which I actually agree with in a lot of ways. But it is really to become conscious of how much extra work am I doing, and is this extra work really going to have some kind of result? Just doing more work is not going to have a result. Like, you have to really get clear on the fact that people can advance in their careers and they can get promotions and they can get salary increases, but that's typically if they're providing something that the company believes is additional value. And that may not always be additional work. And so it's your job to really figure out, what does this company value, right? How do I make my, self more valuable to my manager or to my manager's manager or to the bottom line or whatever it is. And for every company, it's going to be different. For some people, for some companies, it really isn't going to be at all about extra work. And it's going to be about maybe, creating new business development and connections and having a bigger roster of people that are going to open doors, right? That may not be that you're spending more time. It just means that you're being more strategic with your time in the work that you're doing. And in fact, I think a lot of us, when we realize like the work that is the quote unquote valuable work that kind of moves the needle forward for the company, is usually not the work that we're doing a lot of extra work with. Like, that's usually grunt work, right? It's, if you know the Pareto principle, which is like the 80-20 rule, it says that like basically 20% of our effort, it creates 80% of the results, and then 80% of our effort, which is like a lot of the tasks and the mundane stuff, creates only 20% of the results, right? You want to get clear on what's the 20% that's moving the needle forward, that's going to get the company 80% of the results. How can I maybe do more of that or be better at that, or, set myself up strategically where they see me as an expert in that, as opposed to how can I stop doing all of the 80% that's not really doing much for the company and it's running me into the ground. It's all of those things that I might just say yes to because I want to be a team player. Like, I'm going to volunteer on this committee, and I'm going to, when someone asks at a meeting, like, hey, can, someone send me this file? It's like me rummaging through, our database in order to find something for someone. And yes, that might seem like a small thing, but when I'm doing it constantly, when I'm being volunteered to do, let's say, all the presentations because I'm good with PowerPoint and somebody else isn't, how much of that of my time is that taking away? And is that really a skill that the company is going to look at as not something that's irreplaceable? Or if push came to shove, would they still be able to replace me? And so I want you to really just think about this idea that you've been ingrained in. And for so many of us that were successful in school, and so many of us that did get the A+ and did try to do the extra credit and did always do more, we have a tendency to believe that we always have to give more, more, more. We always have to just like, no matter how much they ask, we have to go one above it. And you have to really ask yourself, like, is that in my best interest? Because the thing is you live in a finite reality, right? You only have a certain amount of energy. You only have a certain amount of time. And so you can do all this stuff, but then you're going to burn yourself out. Then you're not going to have time at home for the rest of your life, right? And so you have to start really like evaluating, is it worth the result I'm going to get? It isn't just a given just because like in school it was that way. It's not that way in corporate America. And so you have to really get clear, is this going to be a good trade-off for me? Or am I only doing it because I'm really deeply uncomfortable with not being the star employee and not getting the pats on the back and not getting validation and not, being seen as the best part of the team? And, God forbid I ever get any type of like feedback that's not 100% glowing. If that's the case, then you have to get better at dealing with that discomfort. You have to get better with like, can I not be the star employee and still be okay with myself and allow myself to like take the energy that I save from that and put it into other things in my life. So that's one. I think like we all have to get out of this, teacher's pet, star employee, A+, like always doing the most kind of mentality. We have to really figure out like, this is a transactional relationship. They pay me for a certain level of tasks. Am I doing more than what I should be doing, like than what I'm getting paid for? Am I taking on tasks that have nothing to do with me or my job? Why am I doing that? Why am I not bringing up the fact that like I'm not getting paid for this? So, can you give it to someone else? Or can we talk about my compensation or whatnot? Like, why am I not advocating for myself? Why am I just taking on more and more? The other thing that I think, so that was the first one. The second thing that I think is actually really huge for people in the corporate world is really disentangling yourself from the idea that it is possible to get 100% correct on something, on anything. So what I mean by that is when you are in school, you learn that there's a closed set of information. There is, the test is going to be on chapters 10 to 15 or whatever it is that you've learned in that semester. That's all you're going to be tested on, right? They're not going to come test you on another subject. They're not going to test you on something that nobody was ever taught. There's a closed universe that you were taught in that is limited, and you get tested on that. And then obviously the way that we're tested is, on the scale of like 0 to 100, and we get grades and whatnot. And you can get to a place where you memorize everything and you're really good at test taking and you're really smart and you get that 100%, right? And for so many of us, it becomes almost this knee-jerk reaction of like always having to try to get that 100%. It's like that's what you work towards. And that is what all of school is based on. So of course, after years and years and years and years of doing this, a lot of us develop these perfectionist tendencies where we have to try to be the best of the best. We have to try to get the best score there is. And yeah, maybe you don't get 100 every time, but you get kind of close to it, right? And you sort of learn this game of I have to memorize or learn everything in this universe, and then I have to regurgitate it on this test. What happens is that you go from this closed universe into the real world, which is not a closed universe. It is an open universe. And there's an insane amount of information, even more so now with technology. For a lot of us, it's very different from when we were in school, but there is just constantly more things to learn or to know. And so many of us become debilitated by this, and we become debilitated by our own perfectionism. And I actually think this is a big reason why a lot of people have imposter syndrome, because for so many of us, we go into work thinking, I have to know everything. And if I don't know everything, then I'm a fraud. There's something wrong with me. They're going to find out, right? I know I felt like this when I was a lawyer and I had graduated. And obviously when you're first starting out, you're just learning. But I kept thinking this idea of like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. They're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing. And it was because like at any given moment, if a question came up, I didn't know the answer to it. And even if I researched it, I wasn't 100% sure that I found every case on that matter, and I might have missed something. And, new cases were coming out all the time, and I didn't know if I was maybe searching in the right way. And there was this very open-ended kind of question. A lot of law in general is very open-ended and gray and constantly fluid and in fluctuation. And and I know that for me, it constantly made me feel, because I had been so used to getting straight A's and always getting really good grades on my tests, because I could take the finite information and memorize it and give you the exact, answer you need for any question. But when I didn't know what question was going to pop up, and I didn't know, there was no finite universe, there was tons and tons of information, I was debilitated by this idea of, I don't know what I'm doing. And someone's going to figure that out soon, because I had this mistaken belief that other people, I don't know, somehow did know all of the law and knew all of the answer. But I was so terrified that I was going to make a mistake, right? Not realizing, of course, I'm going to make a mistake because I'm a human and there's just so much information out there. And of course, I'm going to overlook something once in a while, right? And that's just a normal part of being a human in this world. But I was so locked in on this idea that like I had to be an A+ student. I had to get 100%. And if there was something that I didn't know all of the answers to, then I was terrified. And I think that so many people feel like this in their jobs, and they have this sense of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, what the answer is here, and everyone else is going to know that I don't know, and that's a problem. And so we keep ourselves beyond like anxious. We don't go for promotions. We don't put ourselves up for bigger jobs. For a lot of women, we don't even apply for the job because we think we don't know, we don't have all of the answers, or we don't have all of the qualifications, because we're under this impression that there is some place where you can learn all this information, you can know everything, and until you know it, you can't move forward, right? And that is just based on the schooling model, is that like you kind of learned in levels. You go from each grade, you learn everything, and then you get passed on and you go to the next level and the next level. And that's just not the way it works in corporate America. And I think when you start realizing like, of course, I'm not going to know everything. Of course, I'm going to make mistakes. Of course, I'm not going to ever have 100% of the answers. And nobody's testing me on that. Nobody even needs that. I have a concept in my program that I talk about a lot, and I really get people to be comfortable with doing B- work, because for so many of us, we never were comfortable with that. It was like, if it wasn't an A, then I want nothing to do with it. And we created these kind of mechanisms, these like protective mechanisms of perfectionism around ourselves. And we always strive for that. And so it becomes deeply uncomfortable when I have to do work that's good enough. But the reality of it in corporate America and in work is that, again, there's only a finite amount of time, and things have to keep moving, right? And you have to go on to the next deadline and the next deadline, and there's the next problem and the next problem. And if you're constantly looking to be perfect and every single thing has to be 100%, you will get so bogged down with one thing that you actually will miss tons and tons of other stuff that you should be doing. And so most employers don't want you or don't need you to be perfect. Most of your coworkers don't need you to be perfect. They just need the job to get done. And again, that comes back to our own discomfort of not turning in something that's, close to 100% or our best work, or, with all the information. And you just have to become comfortable with the fact that like, I won't have all the information. And that's not to say that you can't try your best, or that you can't try to look for the information, or you can't try to like create safeguards to make sure you're not making a mistake. But it's simply understanding, again, that like you are a human being with a human mind, and you're going to sometimes make mistakes, or you're sometimes not going to have all the answers, or you're going to sometimes have to be okay with the fact that there's still doubt and uncertainty because you can't comb through all of the information on this topic. You sort of have to like cut your losses at a certain point and decide like, this is good enough. Like, where is good enough? You have to define that for yourself. Like, what does good enough look like if it's not 100%? Because that's just not how it works in the real world. And you don't need it to work like that. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned in entrepreneurship that's been great is I was terrified from the beginning of like when things didn't look perfect or they weren't perfect. And I realized if I'm constantly waiting for it to be perfect, I will never get anything out because it's just not going to happen. It's not going to be up to my standard. And so I had to really redefine like what is good enough. Can I just, it's like good enough to go out to people. It might help one person. It may still have typos. It might, the link might be broken once in a while, or I'm not doing it on purpose, but it's going to happen and I'll deal with it when it happens. But at least I'm moving forward. At least I'm, creating podcasts and putting things out there and sending a newsletter and creating a program and selling the program and doing it all kind of in this B- work kind of way. And I will, as a caveat, every time I do this concept of B- work, I have to say that like other people will view your B- work as A work. The reason we go with B- based on your standard is because you're typically too hard on yourself. You typically are going for perfection, and what you do, other people will look at it and be like, oh, that looks great. I thought what they did was wonderful, right? And so it's not to say that it is actually B- work. Again, nobody's grading us. There's no grade system anymore, right? It's more for yourself. It's a concept of understanding, is it good enough to go out? And what does that mean? Good enough cannot be 100% perfect with no mistakes and everything is wonderful, because I will never get past this point, right? So that's the second one, is trying to get things 100% correct. Trying to go for the A+, is really embracing this good enough standard of B- work and putting things out there and understanding that you live in an infinite world with infinite information, and there is no way to know everything about everything. And so you have to start really like picking and choosing what are the projects where I really do want to spend a ton of time. Maybe the email that I have to respond to that I'm spending 45 minutes crafting 2 sentences, like maybe that one I can let go. Maybe good enough for that can be like, can I just respond in 5 minutes and just let it be, right? Can I sit with the discomfort of like, oh no, they might think something, they might not think I'm, that smart, or maybe I put too many exclamation points or whatever. Like, can I stop the obsession with every part of my day having to be the perfect person? The last thing I will say with stuff that I think we've learned in school that has been really detrimental, and there is other things. This isn't to say that it's an exhaustive list, but I think these 3 things are what I see really holding a lot of people back, is, again, this concept that we were indoctrinated in, that somebody else has the answers and knows the path, and you just have to put your head down and follow the rules and follow the one path. There's one path to get there, and so you have to, take the tests, get the grades, go to this school, get the degree in order to get this job. And that was the case for a lot of us in school. That was the case of like, yeah, like if I want to be a lawyer in America, this is what I have to do. If I want to go to medical school, this is what I have to do. Even on a micro level, the message that was given within school that we all kind of grew up learning is that like the adults know better than what we know. Like they know they know what's best for us. And you don't really need to understand it. You don't need to ask a lot of questions. You just kind of do what they've told you to do. And you try to excel within that system. You try to get the best grades, and then you will be a quote unquote success. Then you will make it somewhere, right? And we've all tried that to a certain extent. And it's not to say that there isn't any benefit in that. Of course, as you're growing up and you're a child, you don't know a lot of things, and your parents or teachers are looking out for you, and they are trying to teach you, obviously, and instill in you a lot of skills that will be helpful. But I think that what happens is that for so many of us, we sort of give up our agency, and we really then look to like somebody else has to have the answers for my life. Somebody else has to tell me exactly what I should do and exactly what the path is. And we even do this within our careers, even like within a career path. I think we think like there is only one way to create that career or create that path. And that's typically not the case. Not to say it's not always. Sometimes maybe it's a linear path that's laid out by people before you. Great. But from now, having like witnessed so many other people's careers and seeing how the different ways that people create their careers, and the different detours that they take and the sabbaticals they take or the time off they take to be with their kids and then come back, or, just different avenues they took to get to that place. I think that it's such a disservice to think that there's only one way. And when you start realizing, like, I think the worst advice anybody could ever give you is put your head down and don't ask questions, right? I mean, it's like you have to pick your head up. You have to look around and think about these questions for yourself in your career of like, where do I want to go? What is at the end of this road? Do I want to be on this road? Is there a better way to get there? Is there a faster way? What I was just talking about earlier when I was saying how every company wants to create value. And if you can help them create value in a certain way for their customers or their clients, you will become more irreplaceable to them. You will become a bigger value add to them, right? And when you realize this, it becomes easier to play the game of figuring out, if I want to advance in this career, maybe everybody else is doing it a certain way, but I can add value in this other way. I can likely make myself valuable maybe even faster than other people, right? But I think a lot of us don't ever want to rock the boat, so we just always do it the way that we've been told. And, what is it? Fortune favors the brave or the bold or something like that. It's like the thing is that a lot of times when there are people that come that kind of break the paradigm or try different things or do it in a really bold way, they do tend to be rewarded for it, or maybe shorten the time that it takes to get promoted or whatnot, because they aren't, it's not that they're trying to be disruptive, is that they're looking at like, where is the hole in this market or in this company? What needs to be filled, and can I offer that? And I think for a lot of us, we've been programmed to be more docile than that, more timid. Like, just do what you're told. Don't ask questions. Don't make waves. Don't try to stand out. Don't try to, be like, I don't know, you don't want your coworkers to hate you if you're good at your job or you're, better at something. And so a lot of us dim our shine. A lot of us don't think about ways that we can add value. A lot of us don't really look up to think about these deeper questions of like, what is the value we're creating here? What would help my managers most? I think about this sometimes, like when I was a lawyer and I worked in big law, obviously like there was a very set path that is set towards like becoming partner. And I think that a lot of us, and I ended up leaving, but I think that people followed a very similar path, and a lot of it is a lot of grind and working a ton. And I do think you have to like pay your dues in certain ways. But I always think about like there was certain people who really understood that you can either do that, you can either become a partner because you are just the hardest worker and you work the most hours and you build the most hours. And that is one way. And that is sort of the path that's created for most people. And then other people realize like, okay, but the law firm just wants to bring in money. It wants to bring in new cases. It wants to bring in new business, right? And if I have more contacts with people that will bring their cases or their, companies to us and have us represent them, if I can bring in more business, then I am a value. I am an asset to this law firm, even if I don't sit behind my desk and bill 2,000 hours, let's say, right? And so a lot of people started learning, like not a lot, but some people were like, if I'm naturally, let's say, I have a natural skill of being a connector with people and I really like connecting with people and I like business development. Well, that is the way I can value add without having to be basically like the best motion writer, right? Like I'm not going to do the best research and writing, but I can get more clients. I can bring business in. And guess what? Those people also make partner and they actually become much more valuable to the law firm because they are the ones bringing in business, because they're going to have tons of people that are just cogs in the wheel that are just doing all the grunt work because they're used to doing that. But they don't have the couple of people that are like, you know what? I'd rather be out at lunches or at networking events or, meeting these people at whatever it is, being a part of whatever group I need to be in to then get more business for our law firm. And now I'm not saying that's just one example I'm thinking about. And I was thinking about it because I am someone that likes connecting with people and networking. And I was realizing like, I never even realized that was sort of an option as a lawyer, is to like merge this legal background with like business development and bring in more business. And then you could stay there, without working the same types of hours maybe. And so I just say that as like one example. And I think that for a lot of people, when you start looking up and really like thinking about these deeper questions of like, what is the end goal here for this company? What are things that really do move the needle forward? What are the 20% of things that make this place more successful? And how would I be able to support that or help that or think outside the box at that? And I think you can't do that if you're always put your head down and just do what you're told. Now, that's within your specific job, but I think even more so within your career. I think for so many of us, again, we've been taught to be this like sort of follow the crowd, the subservient person that like does what we're told. And we did that so long in school that so many of us just keep doing that in our careers. And I can't emphasize this enough that like if you want to have a career that you love, like you have to take control of it. You have to decide, if I don't do it the way everybody else does it, what would it look like for me, right? I get so many people that DM me and ask me questions about like, well, I really want to take a sabbatical, but I'm afraid it's going to look bad on my resume or there's going to be a gap. And that's because the narrative you've been told is like there should never be a gap, right? Again, it's like somebody else told you these rules and we just keep living by it. And again, I'm not saying that you don't have to like be concerned or you shouldn't think through things. You should think about how it's going to affect you and whatnot. But I think for so many of us, we really have to decide like, okay, but do I want a career where I never get to take a break, where I don't get to take time off to be with my kids, where I work for companies that don't allow me to have more than 2 weeks off a year? Like, that has to be a choice for me, right? Maybe I do it. For a lot of us, we just randomly fall into it. But if you want to take control of it, you really have to start deciding, is this going to be something that I choose to do, or do I want my career to look different? And if I want it to look different, how can it look different? What are some jobs, let's say, some companies that are okay with sabbaticals, that allow their employees to take sabbaticals? What are other examples of people that have taken sabbaticals and have gone back, right? Can I look at it and start really figuring out like, what is the type of career I want to have and how do I create that for myself? You have to look up, ask questions, look around, figure out what you want and start moving towards that. It's not to say that it's going to happen instantly or it's going to happen exactly where you are, but it can happen. And it can't happen if you're just kind of following the crowd and always doing what everybody else does. It requires you to be like, you know what? I don't want this. So is there another way for me to work in this job? If not, there another way for me to work in this career at another job? If not, is there another career that I want? Is there a way that I can build this career? I want you guys to just ask more questions. I want you to ask more questions of yourself. I want you to look into what other people are doing. I want you to plan more in the future so that maybe you can't do it this year, but can you do it in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? Can you set yourself up for that? And so those are the things that I really think, those 3 things that I've noticed from people that I think keeps them really deeply unhappy in their careers and keeps them on this rat race, on this hamster wheel, because for so many of us, we're just constantly running ourselves into the ground, trying to give 110%, trying to be the A+ student. Many of us are running ourselves into the ground, like trying to, do whatever it is people told us, like put our head down and follow this path constantly. And a lot of us are trying to like know 100% the right answer and always be perfect. And that is just the fastest way to get yourself into burnout. And so if you want to prevent that, you're going to have to start like unlearning all of these things and approaching your job in a different way, with a different mindset, with different beliefs. And if you want help with that, that is exactly what I help people with in my membership in the Quitter Club. And we're gearing up to open doors soon. You can come to that free class to learn more. You can come to the Quit the Rat Race Masterclass. You can go to www.quitterclub.com/masterclass. I hope to see you there.